Did you know that humans are real space people? You were born in space. Heck, even I was born in space. We were all born in space. But for humans to be here on Earth, so many conditions have to be precisely correct that it's highly improbable that we even exist. But we do. First, we, and any other space creatures who might be out there, have to live on a planet orbiting a yellowish white star, not a red star or a blue star. Not a blue star, because they burn out too quickly. In a few million years, there wouldn't be time for evolution to do its relatively slow magic and produce intelligent beings. Blue stars also tend to swell up and turn red when they collapse and explode. It makes it highly unlikely that any civilization could prosper near a blue star. Red stars, which are by far the most numerous kind of stars, don't seem like good prospects for intelligent civilizations to orbit around either. Red stars are so cold and so dim that a planet that could grow a civilization must orbit very closely to the red star, which would expose the planet to intense deadly X-ray radiation. So, though red stars are the most numerous and appear to have many planets orbiting them, red stars are a no-go for hosting intelligent, civilized life like our own. That leaves the yellowish stars, about 10% of all stars. However, an important fact must be met before considering the possibility of intelligent life living around a yellowish star. That fact is that the yellow star must be a third-generation star. Only third-generation stars will contain sufficient chemical diversity to sustain advanced life forms. Each time a star explodes, heavier, more complicated elements are created. The explosion expelled these elements and eventually found their way into a nebula. Gravity within the nebula will gradually form the next generation of stars, and so on. Our bodies need calcium for our skeletons and teeth. Our brains need zinc to help create the electrochemical signals that make us move, feel, and think. Our blood needs iron. Therefore, our bodies need to have formed around a third-generation star, and a yellow one. Amazingly, Earth has all the different elements in the universe, all 94 naturally occurring ones, from hydrogen to plutonium. Maybe that's why we're here. And we have to thank our third-generation yellow dwarf sun for that. Why yellow? Because yellow stars burn very steadily by nuclear fusion, without significantly changing brightness over billions of years. If our sun became just 6% brighter or dimmer, Earth would become too hot or too cold to sustain civilized life. Fortunately, Earth is in the habitable zone around the sun. The habitable zone is where liquid water can exist on a planet. But that brings us to the second condition necessary for intelligent life to live in space: the planet itself. Recent studies with the Kepler telescope have shown that 1/4 of all yellow dwarf stars may contain Earth-like planets in the habitable zone around yellow dwarf stars. That figure is somewhat debatable. It might be as few as 1 out of every 33 yellow dwarf stars, but that's still a lot of planets orbiting yellow stars in habitable zones. So let's consider the second essential component for intelligent life in space: the planet itself. The planet that would bear intelligent civilization must have many particular characteristics that aren't easy to come by individually, and even more rare to find in combination. Most importantly, the planet must have protection against the star it's orbiting. Because stars shine by nuclear fusion in their cores, gas in the outer shell of the sun, called the corona, gets blown off into space in what's called the solar wind. Our United States satellites take constant readings of the force of the solar wind, which is mainly electrified, ionized, hydrogen nuclei, along with a smattering of atomic nuclei from the many other elements found in the sun. It's not the atmosphere that protects Earth, it's the magnetosphere that stops or deflects the dangerous solar wind, causing aurorae when the solar wind is attracted to Earth's magnetic poles and electrifies the air of the upper atmosphere like a fluorescent bulb. Without a magnetosphere surrounding it, any planet, even those in habitable zones, would be toasted by a constant rain of ionized hydrogen nuclei from its star. A planet with life on it must have a magnetosphere strong enough to deflect the solar wind. Not every planet in our solar system has a magnetosphere. The gas giant planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, have magnetospheres, but gas planets cannot have civilizations. Of the solid worlds, only Earth and Mercury have magnetospheres, and Mercury is too weak to stop the solar wind because of its closeness to the Sun. Another protective shield that keeps the Earth safe from the Sun is its atmosphere. The atmosphere is about 300 miles thick, with most of it concentrated within just 10 miles of the Earth's surface. The atmosphere protects life on Earth from both the Sun's ultraviolet (UV) radiation and X-rays. The gas, ozone, which is 3 oxygen atoms bound into a large gas molecule in the upper atmosphere, blocks most of the Sun's UV radiation from reaching the ground. The planet Mars, whose atmosphere is 1,000 times thinner than the Earth's, has no ozone, and the Sun's ultraviolet emissions have totally irradiated its surface. A planet must be able to stop the UV radiation from its star, so the specific composition of the atmosphere is critical for any planet to have an intelligent civilization. We've got it, but it is a rare and precarious mix. The planet must have some part of its surface solid to walk and work on. The planet must have a crust. It's pure science fiction to consider underwater civilizations or floating civilizations in the atmospheres of other planets. A planet's crust must have tectonic plates that move. This movement of tectonic plates creates the subduction of the crust. Subduction is when one tectonic plate slides under or over another, bringing the fresh matter to the surface. This renewal of the chemical properties of the planet prevents chemical equilibrium, where nothing is reactive. Earthquakes and volcanoes also contribute to the process of geochemical renewal. That's right, earthquakes and volcanoes are good. Subduction of tectonic plates, then, is another planetary essential for life. Mars doesn't have tectonic plate activity, neither does Venus nor Mercury. Mercury is one big tectonic plate, but there's no ongoing plate activity other than slight shrinkage. One big reason these planets have no life is that there's no geochemical reactivity because there's no tectonic subduction. And that brings us to the Moon. Yes, the Moon. To say that the Moon keeps us alive may seem like a stretch, but the contribution of the Moon to life on Earth is essential. First, the gravity of the Moon as it moves through space with the Earth not only makes the ocean tides ebb and flow, it also helps the rotation of the Earth to churn or stir the magma inside the Earth. The motion of the magma inside the Earth, with its high metallic content, contributes to the creation of the Earth's magnetosphere. So, the Moon keeps us safe in space by helping Earth become a geodynamo and creating our magnetism. The Moon is the largest moon in the solar system compared to the size of the planet it orbits. Essentially, it's primary. Many people consider the Earth-Moon system to be a double planet, but that's another issue. Another thing the Moon does that keeps life safe on Earth is to hold the Earth steady. Because the Moon is gravitationally locked to the Earth, the Moon acts much like a balance pole does for a tightrope walker. Therefore, the Earth doesn't wobble very much compared to other planets. This wobble is called libration. If the Earth wobbled as much as Mars or Saturn, not only would our weather become chaotic, but farming might have been impossible. These rare or unique astronomical circumstances work together to make Earth habitable for humanity. Many other factors are not astronomical, such as evolutionary, biological, and chemical factors required for life to exist on Earth. The probabilities, or improbabilities, are multiplying. Taken all together, we are very, very lucky to be here. In fact, we're so lucky that we may have hit the jackpot. Considering all the possibilities, it's doubtful that anywhere else in the universe is as fortunate as Earth.
The announcement day. Hello everyone and welcome to my space vlog. I'm so excited because I have a big announcement to make. After completing years of training, the day I've been waiting for all my life is finally here. I was always happy to be among the 350 people who have been selected to be NASA astronauts, you know. And here's a fun fact for you. The original 7 is included in that number. So it's fair to say I'm in the Legends League. But the great news is that now I'm finally done with the virtual reality lab and I'm actually going to go into space. There are so many things I need to do to get ready for my first mission. So I'll keep today's vlog short, but get ready to hear all about my space adventures in the upcoming days. The day before the launch. Now you would think the day before the launch would be a busy one for the crew, right? But it's actually quite relaxed in terms of things to do. Since the upcoming days are going to be stressful, NASA lets us spend time with some of our selected family members or friends who have been cleared to be near us during our pre-flight quarantine. We also get to stay at a beach house they own. Is this a dream job or what? But the most important thing we're advised to do today is to get a good night's sleep. That is, if you can, but no pressure. I'm going to try and do that now, so off to bed I go. It's a good thing that we were banned from drinking coffee 24 hours prior to the launch. Otherwise, I bet all the caffeine would prevent me from having peaceful dreams. Launch day. Today is the big day. First of all, although it's one of my favorite songs, I'm trying to avoid listening to David Bowie's Space Oddity, because ain't nobody wants any sad vibes. Secondly, coffee is not permitted for breakfast on the morning of the launch because of its diuretic properties. Having to use the restroom all the time can be a bit of a problem when you're going off to space in the cockpit, you know. Now, this may be a bit shocking for you, but other than all this, the astronauts have a significant chunk of downtime during a launch day. Before we depart for the launch pad, we do a final check and head to the restrooms for a pre-launch pee. Then it's time to climb into the cockpit. Many of us actually take a nap once we're there, as the system goes through thousands of pre-launch checks, including air-to-ground voice checks with launch control and mission control. And here's a fun fact for you. We wear adult diapers during this time, just in case. Alright now, let's eliminate talking about elimination for now. Well, now that everything is checked, it's time to start the main engine. Prepare for liftoff. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Woohoo! A day in space. Welcome to space. Now, I was going to say I will walk you through what a day for an astronaut on a space mission looks like now. But up here, I will float you through it. Now, first of all, every minute and every second of an astronaut's day in space is planned. From eating and brushing our teeth to working and sleeping, every move we make is based on a schedule. The things we have to do are planned down to 5-minute increments by a team in mission control called Ops Planner. This is crucial because these schedules show what is happening and who is involved with what at any given time on the space station. But don't worry, it's not all work and no play. Even if those are according to a schedule too, we still have free time to ourselves. Now, the concept of a day aboard an orbiting spacecraft is a bit different than what you might imagine. Every 24 hours, astronauts on board the International Space Station experience 15 sunrises and 15 sunsets as the station moves around the world. But for millions of years, humans have been living according to a 24-hour daily cycle. Our brains and bodies follow the circadian rhythm of waking and sleeping. That's why astronauts work and sleep to similar schedules that match these cycles and rhythms, because anything other than that would have us living in a state of permanent jet lag. Accordingly, an overall day for us looks like this. The workday is from approximately 6 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, and it includes 3 meals and 2.5 hours of exercise. The morning routine. Our space morning schedule is sort of similar to our Earth morning schedule. We are awoken by an alarm, and we begin our hygiene routine with the stuff that is provided for us in our hygiene kits given by NASA. Those include rinseless shampoos that require very little water, since there are no genuine showers in space. The funny thing is, the water we use floats away during this. And each of us is allowed to take our choice of products with us in these kits, including cosmetics and toothpaste. There are razors to shave or clippers and scissors to give ourselves and each other haircuts if necessary. We just have to make sure to vacuum up that hair so it doesn't fly in our faces later as we're working. The food. We don't skip breakfast. It's the first of 3 meals we have, including lunch and dinner. When it comes to how much we eat, it really depends on the calorie necessities of each person. One great thing is that we don't really have to cook or do the dishes, since the meals are already cooked on Earth and come in disposable packages. You should know space food has improved greatly in taste and variety since Apollo missions, in which astronauts ate purely freeze-dried food for days. The space work. After we're done eating, it's time to get to work. Each of us settle down to the assigned tasks of the day. These assignments range from supervising experiments to performing routine maintenance on station equipment. Our work also includes checking projects that are controlled from the ground, as well as participating in experiments ourselves to figure out how well our bodies adapt to living in space for long periods of time. Space Gym. Now, doing exercise is an essential part of our day. We actually commit hours every day to fitness. Normally on Earth, our bodies are constantly active because they're working against gravity to move. But with very limited gravity in space, movement is easier and doesn't require much work or energy. So, astronauts who spent a long period of time in space and didn't continue to train physically would lose a lot of muscle, which would leave them feeling weak once they return home. That's why it's vital for us to stay physically active to prevent bone and muscle loss. It also helps relieve what we call space snuffles that are caused by body fluids accumulating in the head due to not being tugged downward by gravity. Our regular exercise options include cardio using a treadmill or a bike. We do some weightlifting too. And to do all these, we have to strap ourselves down to the exercise machines because if we don't, we'll float away and our efforts would be for nothing. PreTime. Mission organizers on Earth make time every day for us to relax and have fun here in space. This is when we write emails, watch movies, or even play an instrument. But to be honest, the most popular pastime in space is looking out the window to watch the Earth go by beneath you. There are also spectacular sunrises and sunsets to enjoy, which occur every 45 minutes as we orbit. So it's fair to say there's no time to get bored. By the way, just like Earthlings, we get weekends off too to recharge. Sweet dreams. It's important for us to get a good night's sleep to have energy for the next day's tasks. However, here in space, we can't climb into our beds. We have sleeping bags instead, which are attached to the wall to keep us secure. If they weren't, we'd be floating around all night, which sounds neither safe nor restful. Okay, I gotta go because I gotta go.
Traveling at about 17,000 miles per hour, 250 miles above the Earth, astronauts watch 16 sunrises and sunsets every day while floating around in a box with a handful of people they depend on for survival. Whether humans should set off to other worlds beyond Earth or not, one of the most compelling drawbacks is this: our bodies don't like it. Few people know this better than the NASA astronaut who spent nearly a year on the International Space Station from 2015 to 2016, Scott Kelly. Like other astronauts, Mr. Kelly served as a test subject in the study of space travel's effects on the human body. Unlike other astronauts, Mr. Kelly has an identical twin, Mark, who is an astronaut himself. This gave researchers an uncommon opportunity to monitor the two brothers as they lived in two very different environments, one on Earth and the other 250 miles above it. When the astronaut went into space and his slightly older twin brother Mark stayed on Earth, the age gap between them increased thanks to his time in orbit. And it's all down to Einstein's theory of relativity. What it suggests is that time moves more slowly for objects in motion than it does for a stationary observer. It also moves more slowly the closer you are to a gravitational mass like Earth. In other words, we're not all experiencing time at the same rate. The faster you move and accelerate, the more time slows down. And because Mr. Kelly has been zooming up to and down from space and orbiting the planet at around 17,500 miles per hour, his brother Mark has lived through 0.005 extra seconds. The brothers were born 6 seconds apart back in 1964, and now that gap is 6.005 seconds. This warping of time is known as time dilation, and the Kelly brothers qualify for both aspects of it: how fast they've been moving in relation to one another and how close they are to a big object, which is Earth. So, depending on our position and speed, time can appear to move faster or slower to us relative to others in a different part of space-time. And for astronauts on the International Space Station, that means they get to age just a tiny bit slower than people on Earth. That doesn't mean you could spend your life in a basement just to outlive the rest of us here on the surface. The effect isn't noticeable on such a small scale. If you became a basement hermit, then across your entire lifetime, you'd only age a fraction of a second slower than everyone else above ground. But your brain might freeze when you think about this. A watch strapped to your ankle will eventually fall behind one strapped to your wrist. Your head technically ages more quickly than your feet. Time passes faster for people living on a mountain than those living at sea level. The classic example for this is the twin scenario. One twin blasts off in a spaceship, traveling close to the speed of light, and the other stays behind on Earth. When the space-traveling twin returns to Earth, she's only aged a couple of years. But she's shocked to find that her Earthbound sister has aged over a decade. Of course, no one has performed that experiment in real life, but there's evidence that it's real. When scientists launched an atomic clock into orbit and back, while keeping an identical clock here on Earth, it returned running ever so slightly behind the Earthbound clock. Then time gets even more complicated, because time dilation can happen anytime. A good way to think about it is to consider the astronauts living on the International Space Station. They're floating about 260 miles above where Earth's gravitational pull is weaker than it is at the surface. That means time should speed up for them relative to the people on the ground. But the space station is also whizzing around Earth at about nearly 5 miles per second. That means time should also slow down for the astronauts relative to people on the surface. But the reality is that Mark, the brother who's aged a few milliseconds longer, could end up better off in the long run if Mr. Kelly's extended time in space causes his body to deteriorate faster. 10 science teams in NASA's twin study examined the brothers' astronauts before, during, and after the astronauts' 340 days in space. The teams studied each twin's bodily functions, they ran memory tests, and they examined the men's genes, looking what differences might be due to space travel. They confirmed that lengthy space travel stresses the human body in many ways. Space living can change genes and send the immune system into overdrive. It can dull mind and memory. Most changes that the astronaut experienced in space reversed once he returned to Earth, but not everything. The researchers tested him again after 6 months back on land. Roughly 91% of the genes that had changed activity in space were now back to normal. The rest stayed in space mode. His immune system, for instance, remained on high alert. DNA repair genes were still overly active, and some of his chromosomes were still topsy-turvy. What's more, the astronaut's mental abilities had declined from pre-flight levels. He was slower and less accurate on short-term memory and logic tests. It's unclear whether these results are definitely from spaceflight. That's partly because the observations are from only one person. But one thing is sure, time is relative. Think of it this way. If a clock is stationary and you are traveling at a very high speed, you happen to pass by this clock and have a glimpse at it, you'll see that it's running slowly, or maybe it's completely static. This is because the speed at which the mechanical functions of the clock are working slower than you. What you see is the time in the past, while you have already skipped that second and are in the future. During this experiment of high-speed traveling, you haven't aged at all, because all the processes in your body are working at the same speed as you. After a certain age, your body starts to deteriorate, which eventually leads to a state when it stops functioning. This aging phenomenon, especially in humans, is caused by a protein structure in the cells called telomeres. These structures protect our cells from deteriorating, but with each cell replication, these telomeres start to lose strength, which is called telomere length. If the telomere length shortens to a certain extent, the cell becomes vulnerable to diseases. We can say that telomeres are the natural countdown timers in our bodies, which determine when we will expire. The telomere length can be affected by external factors like stress, which accelerates our timer. The twin study experiment by NASA included documenting the changes in telomere length of both brothers. The telomere length of the space brother increased while he was aboard the International Space Station. Before the mission, both brothers had nearly the same telomere lengths, meaning if we ignore issues like mental stress, both brothers should live roughly an equal age. But while the space brother was orbiting the Earth, he had almost 14.5% longer telomere length. The space brother was a few years younger than his ground brother biologically. Because the telomere length of the space brother resumed to normal when he came back to Earth, it took almost 190 days after return for the telomere length to restore to expected. The blood samples from the International Space Station were sent back to Earth for processing. This means the blood wasn't traveling at the speed of the ISS anymore. Also, the space-time paradox states that the space brother should be younger upon return. But the telomere length restored to its original state before the mission. The space brother was again the same age as his ground brother. A lack of gravity is the main cause for these intense changes in aging. Gravity plays an immense role in the majority of our bodily systems. Take the muscles, for example. Older people's muscles tend to shrink and decline as they age and become less mobile. Astronauts' muscles react in a similar way because they are barely used. That's why astronauts staying in space for extended periods of time use special exercise machines to help reduce this effect. A similar process takes place in the bones. After a certain age, people on Earth start to lose mass in their bones, typically at a rate of about 1 to 2% a year. But in space, those people lose bone mass at a greatly accelerated rate, as much as 1 to 2% a month. Because the astronauts' bodies don't need to support their weight, the bones begin to decrease production of new bone material and increase the amount of old bone absorption. Luckily, their skeletal systems usually return to normal once they've spent some time back on our blue planet. If the space brother was shielded from all harms of space, like radiations, while orbiting the ISS, then he would have lived longer than his ground brother. Even though they're saving 0.005 seconds, astronauts still experience some of the symptoms of a drawn-out aging process. So the next time you find yourself wishing the weekend would last longer, stay low to the ground and move really fast. It won't feel like your weekend got any longer, but technically, you may gain a teeny tiny fraction of a second. You won't need to go to space for this little experiment.